Hey everyone, Mr. Chelman here. We're going to be doing a brief overview or recap of what Lesson 9 was about. Okay, now in Lesson 9, all we're really doing is just comparing the graphs of two different functions. Okay, now we're going to use function notation, so we're going to keep practicing what this function notation means, but all we're doing is just looking at two different graphs or two different lines on a grid and seeing what the differences are between them, comparing different points or the slope or stuff like that. Okay, so this blue one here, we're going to call this function g, right? And this black one here that seems to curve, we're going to call function f. Okay, now I'm just going to go through a little bit of this problem so that we kind of emphasize what we're talking about here when we compare two different functions. Okay, there's lots of things we can compare to this one. Obviously, when we look at these two, they look very different, right? The function f has this curve that goes up and then down. And this function g looks like it has a negative slope. It's going down, and the y-intercept is up here at 8, right? So the intercepts are different, the slopes are different, the colors of the graphs are different, right? There's lots of different things that are different going on. But how do we explain that using function notation? Okay, so up here, we're going to talk about which function has a greater value for each of the given inputs. All right. Now we've been talking about inputs and outputs a lot when we talk about function notation. All right. So remember, when I'm talking about function notation, the input is this variable, right? The input. And the input is almost always down here on this axis. Okay. So we're talking about these variables when we're talking about input. And the output, what it equals, is over here. Okay, so this is the output, right? What it equals. And the output is almost always these numbers over here. Okay, so these are my outputs. All right, so when they're asking us about these two functions, f of 2 and g of 2, we're talking about the same input, number 2, right? So these are both my inputs. Right, if I go down to my inputs, which are down here, okay, my inputs, which are these numbers down here, we're going to this number 2. This is our first input. And what we're doing is we're comparing what is graph F doing, or how high is it, or what's the output at 2, the input of 2. The output for this one is 4. The output for G looks to be about 7.5. Okay, see that? 7.5. They're both having an input of 2. So we're just going to circle which one has a greater output when our input is 2. That's what this means. Okay, so obviously G has a greater output. It's an output of 7.5, or it's at 7.5. It's higher than function f, which is only at 4. So we're going to circle the one that's higher. Okay, let's both look at 4 now. The next one, we have an input of 4. Okay, so now we're moving over to this number. This is our input of 4, right? And let's go up and see what happens. Oh, it looks like both of them intersect right here. So these two graphs cross each other's path right here, or they both equal the same thing. So at 4, they both are at 7. So this one, it's actually neither. Or you could say f of 4 equals g of 4. Now on this one right here, since g of 2 is bigger, we could write it like this. F of 2 is smaller than g of 2. Oops, of 2. Okay, remember the alligator always eats the bigger one? Or f of 2 is less than g of 2. Okay, let's look at this one. The input is 6, right? So we're going to go to 6 on our inputs, which is right here. And we're going to go up and we're going to say, all right, looks like the graph for g, or the function g, is over here at about 6.5, and f, which is above it, is at 8. So f of 6 has a greater output than g of 6. So if I'm going to write this in using inequalities like this, I'm going to say f of 6 is bigger than, it's getting eaten, and g of 6 is smaller. So f of 6 is greater than g of 6. Okay, And finally, f of 8 and g of 8. Our inputs are now right here at 8. So we're looking up here and we're saying, okay, it looks like g is still below f. So g is at 6, f is at 7. So this one is still bigger. So we can say f of 8 is bigger than or greater than g of 8. All right, that's pretty much the gist of this whole lesson, right? We're going to compare points on a graph, and we're going to look at points on a graph or certain inputs, and we're going to compare the outputs of both functions, right? Which one's higher? Are they equaling the same? We're also looking at slopes, right? Like we can describe the differences between these two graphs. So g of whatever our input is, the function g looks like a linear line that's going down, and the function f is a curved line going up and then down. Almost looks like a big rainbow or arc. Okay, we'll talk more about that in a month or two. All right. If you have any questions, please email your teachers or myself, and we will be here to answer them. All right. Be sure to do the homework. It's lesson 9, practice problems number 2, 3, and 4. All right. See you guys next time.